Yeah, I think they. That'll sound good. It's like a cheap hotel room. The Rabbit in this film, I think, yeah, is like not quite so cranked up on 10 all the time. Like, yeah, he was. When you watch those things, you forget how aggressive and like sort of unpleasant Rabbit could come off. Yeah. The weird thing for me is that I realized that, and I guess this was something that I had repressed, but going back and watching the original couple of 2 or 3 Pooh shorts from the 60s that this one harkens back to, I remembered that as a real little kid, and I was probably 6 when these things came out, I thought Rabbit was a female character. You know what I mean? Like, I thought Rabbit was a woman, like an old lady. I don't know what that says about me, but and I had forgotten that I thought that. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, I guess maybe he was just such a fuss budget. He seemed like a cranky, like the cranky old lady down the street, when really he's the cranky old man down the street.
Well, speaking of which, though, again, this is a character that's existed for 30 plus years in the Disney universe. So how did, and again, you're always so good about going back and doing, the research. I mean, for example, Super Robot Monkey Team Hyperforce Go, the James Mason impression.
Yes.
So how did you get the sound for this one?
Thank goodness for me, what made it very easy for me, and a luxury that Jim Cummings didn't have, since he had to be a voice match for Pooh and Tigger since 1987, is that they up front said, we're not looking for a direct voice match. Don't worry about that. We're looking for attitude, we're looking for personality, and we're looking for comedy. I think that, the Poohniverse is so heavy for people that you can't really mess with Pooh or Piglet or Eeyore that much, but like with characters like Owl and Rabbit, I think the feeling was that maybe we can tweak them a little bit, so that they can still be recognizable and maybe get a little more comedic juice out of them. Because obviously Pooh and Piglet and Eeyore are written in stone, and you don't want to change them. You can't change them. It would be sacrilegious. You know what I mean? That's like painting a mustache on the Mona Lisa. Whereas Rabbit and Owl, I think, were a little more amorphous and second tier, maybe. So when I got the call for the audition, hey, they're looking for a new Rabbit, I said, I'm not really a voice match guy. I wish I had that skill set, but I'm not I don't do dead-on impressions. It's not my forte, And they said, don't worry, they're not looking for a direct voice match. They're just looking for attitude, and they want to maybe likability him up a little bit. And so, likability him up. I think I just made up a whole another word.
That's a great word.
New word. Thank you. So I went back and watched the original shorts and just tried to channel the character and the characteristics without slavishly, trapping myself into slavishly trying to do an oral impression, which I can't do anyway. So it was interesting, and basically I went back to knowing what they were looking to do with him. I kind of asked myself the question of like, who's fussy and persnickety but is still likable? Who would that person be? And Jack Lemmon was who I hit on, and I'm like, wow, Jack Lemmon, because he's, there's a guy, he's kind of nervous and he's waiting for the woman to come over and he's got the apron on and he's burning the dinner and he's, he's kind of very orderly and anal, but he doesn't seem like a woman, and he also doesn't seem unlikable. So I kind of just, in terms of personality, just kind of went, a little bit to Jack Lemmon land, and without doing an impression of him. And nobody was more surprised than I was when they said I had got the part, because I knew a lot of people were auditioning for it, and you know, it's a numbers game. You know, most of the stuff you audition for just by the law of averages, you don't get, and some of it you come close and still don't get, and then a certain percentage of it you do get. It's, you know, it's basically just stepping up to the plate and taking your swings.
Do you watch any specific Jack Lemmon's movies?
You know, I just went. Thank goodness for YouTube, the actor's friend. I just went and looked at a whole bunch of Jack Lemmon, from, you know, Save the Tiger, you know, Odd Couple, you know, just he was in a movie called How to Murder Your Wife.
Yeah.
That you know, is one of my favorite movies of all time. I showed it when I guest programmed on TCM, It luckily for me it works. Sometimes it's just kind of finding that key that, you know, that cracks the code, and, you know, without telling the people that are going to be listening to it what you're doing, you just hope that the decision you're making is right. You know, you're reading the tea leaves and trying to make your best guess.
But Lemmon's such a smart choice. No, I mean, again, that's the, you know, and in fact you can see that. There's that wonderful scene at the bottom of the pit where, between your voice work and Eric's animation.
Oh, thank you. Oh, well, you know, thanks for bringing us to that. You know, when Eric Goldberg is, you know, when your physical persona is in the hands of Eric Goldberg, it's almost like you don't have, your talking doesn't really have to do much salesmanship. You know, it doesn't have to sell much. I mean, that was such a thrill for me to have Eric Goldberg be the guy that was animating Rabbit. He's such a he's legendary. You know, he's like you know, Nine Old Men legendary to me. He's just so gifted and so funny and great, and just there's not a lot of guys like that around anymore. You know, he's the best.
What parts of Rabbit from the original movies did you want to make sure, or did you, obviously didn't have as much say, but what were you hoping would make it into the movie? Because a lot of the things, like about his garden and about his house and all of that, weren't like huge focuses in the movie. How important was that for you?
You know, it's just, and I also, you know, luckily having a 7-year-old, the books are still in heavy rotation in my house, and I've read those books and stories literally my whole life. You know, from you know, I'm sure the voice that I did for Rabbit when I would read them out loud to my younger siblings when I was a kid probably is not that much different from what I'm doing in this movie. So you know, the characters are so well delineated that, you know, it's there. You know, and the, you know, the good thing, you know, so much of the real hard stuff is on people like Jim and Travis, and you know, people like that, Peter. So it's is Eeyore Bud? Who's doing it? Yeah, yes. Bud. Yeah, Bud Lucky, right?
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, those guys. You know, Rabbit's just kind of on the outskirts. You know, it's kind of like it's kind of a sweet gig, to be honest. It's kind of, you know, it's like being Norm on Cheers. You know, people are going to be glad when you show up and you sit down at the bar and you do your thing, but really, a lot of the heavy lifting is done by the two leads. Thank goodness for me.
But he did have a pretty big part in this.
Yeah, definitely. But it's kind of nice to be. You know, an ingredient in the souffle without having to be the whole souffle. It's kind of nice, like, you know, like in SpongeBob, you're kind of the. On SpongeBob, I'm kind of the center. You know, it's like you know, it's like being Seinfeld. You know what I mean? Where like that's the character that everything kind of revolves around, and everything takes place in his world, in his apartment, you know, or whatever. And you know, with this, you're kind of it's like being a character actor on a show.
Well, since you brought up the S word, you know, it's, again, as a guy who's been going to Comic-Con forever, it's got to be one thing to have, you know, enjoyed pop culture to suddenly become pop culture. I mean, you voice this character that, you know, is these days up there with Mickey.
Well, you know, if we'll time will tell. I hope he has half those legs. But
10, 12 years at this point, isn't it?
it's been 13 years, and yeah, it's fun. Like I was that kid who always I'm doing what I always wanted to do when I was a kid. Which is kind of unusual for that person who a kid who goes, well, I want to be an astronaut, and then he actually goes into space and enjoys being in space. You're like, well, I did what I wanted to do as a kid, and it doesn't suck. Hey, I like this. There was no wake up moment like, oh God, I wish I wasn't doing this. Like this was what the job I always wanted to do, and it's. I don't want to do anything else. I don't want anybody else's job. I'm smart enough to know that I've got the best job in show business. It's like I don't want to be. Tom Cruise, and I don't want to be Jim Carrey, and and all the voiceover guys feel this way. We have this conversation all the time. Like we've got this lottery scratcher that's been pretty good to us, where you're able to work in show business and make a living at it and do fun stuff and be around creative, stimulating people like yourselves. No, and animators and other, the voiceover people is a very close-knit community. There's not a lot of backbiting or psychodrama within the, I was in the on-camera world while I was trying to bust into voiceover, and I was always amazed when I would meet a voiceover person that was trying to break into on-camera, like, oh, I'm just doing this until I can be on a sitcom, and I go, wow, I'm trying to tunnel into the prison that you're trying to tunnel out of. We're playing a game of Dig Dug here, but it was it's a great job, and guys like Jim were the guys that when I was trying to break in, they were the Babe Ruths, that were the heavy hitters around then. I got in slightly too late in the game to work with Mel Blanc or Dawes Butler or any of those guys. June Foray's a friend of mine. I love her. Not, lucky for us, she's still around and still working and still awesome. And people like that are bigger. We're always bigger than movie stars to me. Like Mel Blanc was way bigger to me than I would fantasize about meeting Mel Blanc. Like people would fantasize about meeting Muhammad Ali or something. Those guys were my idols. And then when you talk to other voiceover people, when you break into that world and you start talking to other people who do it, you realize that they were living the exact same experience. It was hard to find that one other kid that was into Stan Freberg records, in Syracuse, New York. Now in voiceover, you're like, God, all these guys are like, I love that record. That was seminal for me. And you're like, wow, where were you? We all know the same secret handshake, And it was it's cool. It's great. It's a great way to make a living, man. It's pretty funky. It might be the most functional area of show business in terms of psychologically functional. Like, wow, these people are not too crazy and narcissistic and messed up. What's up with that?
Sir, I'm from Latin America, so I was wondering if you think like it's really unfair when you ever seen the translations, and it seems to me that in Latin America now they're trying to show the original versions of the movies and the TV shows, but for example in this case, because it's supposed to be for little kids, they will probably have the translated version.
Sure.
And I always think that.
Where are you from?
From Peru.
You're from Peru.
So
the Peruvian guys are the best.
So you mean, but they miss. I mean, it's just like it's just missing a lot of the. Do you think too bad for
maybe. Do you think so?
Yeah, for me it's just change a lot. I mean, because it's acting,
I wonder about that because sometimes people will send me characters that I do in other languages, done by other actors in other countries. Practically always using the American actor as the template. We want the Italian version of this. We want the Japanese version of this or the French version of this. And I would say most of the time I think those guys are really good, in terms of the vocal quality. Now, I'm not multilingual, so, I don't know what's being lost in translation, but I would say most of the guys that I've heard do the dubbing are quite good. I'm interested to see how this plays out because I'm doing a Well, I don't want to talk too much about that other guy, but no, I'm doing like a cruise ship, a Nickelodeon cruise ship that leaves out of Barcelona and cruises the coast of Italy for a week in July, and it's going to be at least half Europeans, mostly Spanish speakers, and it's like meet the stars of your show, your favorite shows, and I'm going. You realize that if you're watching the show in Spanish, I'm not the guy. Are people just going to be mad?
So you don't think it's unfair? You don't think? I mean, because it's just you're not. They can't see you. They hear your voice, and they can't hear your voice.
Hey, since I don't speak that language, somebody's got to do it.
Subtitles.
Yeah. So I mean, by the same token, I've dubbed a lot of stuff into English that's emanated from other countries.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess turnabout is fair play. I've done Japanese stuff and lately, stuff from India that they're revoicing, with Americanized voices, and South Africa, places like that. We're even if they're speaking English, they want to make it less accented, English. So yeah, I don't find that unfair at all. I wish I spoke other languages. I could probably up my income pretty considerably.
Well, speaking of which, of all the characters that you've voiced over the years, is there a particular favorite? I mean, the performance character you really enjoyed, or a challenging performance, or?
Yeah, obviously, the Sponge you have a soft spot for, I mean, a lot of it is the experience you had working on the show. I do a preschool show for Playhouse Disney called Handy Manny, and that's like, there's a guy on there called Mr. Lopart that's like runs the candy shop, and he's kind of a very bizarre character for a preschool show, very needy, and has a mother fixation, and insecure. To me, I'm like, great, I love this guy. He's the freakiest, most complex character on the show, and we all wind up just speculating about Mr. Lopart all the time on that show, the private life of Mr. Lopart. But a lot of it is just the animators, the creators too, like Steven and Don and Eric are so invested in this, and they obviously have such a love for the material and the original version of it that they're trying to reboot to a little bit. I think it's anybody that has passion it's nice to work on something where the people at the top have real passion for it, and I've been lucky enough to work with like creators that have that passion, whether it's Genndy Tartakovsky or Craig McCracken or Ciro Neely from Super Robot Monkey Team, Disney show, or Rick Gittleson that does Handy Manny. I mean, they're all very invested in their shows, and you want to please them. I look at the voiceover people as basically being session musicians. You're a session drummer, and you just want to play that riff that the band leader is hearing in his head. They're the ones. It's their thing. They're not there to make it easy for me or to please me. I'm there to bring what they are hearing in their heads, to the screen, and so that they go great. Because it's they're responsible for the totality. So it's nice to have Jim there too, because like I said, he's my rock man.
Do you ever find yourself talking in character when you're not at work?
Unconsciously, my kids will catch me. You know what I mean? Where you'll a lot of times it's just like thinking of a joke or something, and you say it in the voice of the character that you want to file it away for, and they'll go, Dad, you're just talking like Pat the Hammer. Oh, sorry, I was sorry. Yeah, it's you're always, it's like I come from a stand-up comedy background, and it was I guess it kind of never stops, where you're kind of always looking around and listening for things that you can mine, because you never know when it's gonna come in handy. You know, Jim was talking today about, you know, loving, you know, him and I both love Cajun music. And, you know, when Princess and the Frog came along, here's this character that sings in Cajun, and Jim's like, I can do that. I can do that. You know, so he goes into the audition loaded for Bear and going, I've got to get this. And I know that same thing, you know, and just all the weird stuff that you're into as a kid, you know, playing in bands or, you know, writing comics, reading comics, listening, you know, obsessing over certain comedy albums, Monty Python being one of them. Do I get to meet John Cleese at the premiere?
TV.
Yay, TBD. I love TBD. You know, Monty Python is so, you know, stuff like that is so seminal for all of us, and it winds up being the stuff that informs the way that you make a living later. You know, like you go, okay, so I always felt a little weird that I didn't care about algebra, but I was obsessed with Monty Python records, and now I guess my instincts were correct for what I'm doing. I can't tell my own kids that.
We just have to go last question.
Do you find it easy to transition from, like, because Nickelodeon has like their own style of how they do animation, then you go do a lot of Disney projects. Do you find that you have to, like,
you know,
kind of think of, okay, what am I doing?
For me, the main difference is most of the shows that I work on are ensemble. You know, everybody's there, and you know, because of the schedules involved with something like this, it you know, you're usually they're concentrating on your character, your lines, and you know, Eric Goldberg's filming you, and for me that was kind of weird, was not having other actors to bounce off of. You know, it's something you get used to. It was kind of nice. Like I go, okay, I feel like I can do that now. Like I learned that. That's my takeaway from this, is being able to be better at doing stuff in a vacuum and just imagining what's going. But you know, it's nice to have those other people to bounce around to. Is Ferguson going to be at the premiere? TBD.